everyone, my name is Katie DeCristofaro, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Massachusetts charter schools and standardized test results. So my research question is, who fills Mass charter school seats and how does it impact the standardized testing reported compared to traditional public schools? More specifically, as it relates to Massachusetts charter schools, my proposal's been informed by this research question. Because of the differences between TPSs and charter schools, I wanted to understand why charter schools were reporting in many instances that their MCAS scores were higher, and therefore also better understand why a policy was in place that was dictating how many charter schools could be operational throughout the state. This led to interesting findings related to charter schools and their student population, which may shed some light on why their standardized test results were being reported as higher throughout the state than the TPSs in the Commonwealth. Because I wasn't totally familiar with charter schools when I started, I figured I would just offer a brief overview. So charter schools are one kind of publicly funded school choice option created by state legislature in 1993 with 71 in operation to date, serving approximately 37,402 students. They operate independently of any school committee under a 5-year agreement and must be approved by way of application by DESE. They are run by a board of trustees with no private sector affiliation, and they're allowed more freedom such as organization of its core mission, curriculum, theme, and/or teaching method, control of their budget, and the hiring and firing of teachers and staff. School days and hours are also dictated by the board of trustees, and it's common that both are longer in comparison to TPSs. They must demonstrate positive results in certain areas, such as specific enrollment parameters within their 5 years of operation, or they're at risk of being put on probation or losing the charter altogether. Admission is through an application process. If there are more applicants than availability, acceptance is granted through a lottery system. They're funded by the TPS budgets, and they may receive grants from benefactors as well. There can be no more than 120 charter schools in operation at one time, with exceptions made for certain districts related to spending caps. I thought this chart was interesting. Kind of shows you where Commonwealth charter schools are throughout the state. Might not be interesting for those who don't live here, but it's not surprisingly many densely populated cities have more than one charter schools in operation today. So the literature review. Charter schools are meant to serve those whom are underserved in TPSs for the most part, such as students with disabilities, English language learners, minorities, and low-income students, or any combination of those. It's what a great deal of their 5-year review surrounds, and therefore positive MCAS results cited by charter schools and outperformance compared to TPSs is uplifting given the mission of these schools. And on the 2014 MCAS, a higher percentage of students scored proficient or advanced in every subject and at every grade level when compared with their peers in traditional public schools. However, some do argue that charter schools' standardized test results aren't fairly or accurately compared to TPSs given the differences in student population. While there are various arguments, my focus is going to primarily be related to low-income SPED and the ELL populations. DESE charter school performance reports and district data legitimately show positive outcomes academically for their student population. For example, on the 2015 PARCC exam, the Edward Brooke charter schools in Boston were the highest performing schools in the state, outscoring wealthy suburbs such as Carlisle, Brookline, Newton, and Wellesley. School performance and student growth in certain subjects such as reading and math is key to understanding the standardized test scores. On average, students in charter schools learn significantly more than their virtual counterparts in reading and mathematics. The typical student in charter school gains more learning in a year than the TPS counterpart, amounting to about 1.5 months of additional gains in reading and 2.5 months in math. SPED students in charter schools make up 12% compared to 16% in TPSs statewide. SPED students in charter schools see significantly larger growth in reading and math than their counterparts at TPSs. The CRADO study that's cited below as well as throughout this presentation noted in their report that SPED was difficult to compare given the small number of SPED students throughout the Commonwealth, not just in charter schools. So I just wanted to make note of that as well. ELL students have similar learning gains in math, whether they attend a charter or TPS, but those in charter schools have significantly lower learning gains in reading than their TPS counterparts. And 44% of charter schools outpace the learning impacts of TPS in reading, and 56% do so in math. So there's no doubt that there's been a proven track record when it comes to charters and low-income minority students. And taken from the Charter Public School Association website, they highlight that charter schools have consistently outperformed TPSs across the state. Independent studies showed that they're closing the achievement gap between low-income African American and Latino children compared to affluent white children. A higher percentage of students in charter schools scored proficient or advanced in all subjects at every grade level with their TPS peers on the MCAS in 2014. And many urban charters with a high percentage of African American, Latino, and low-income students ranked first in the state, outperforming affluent suburban districts. So here is a proclamation and rebuttal, again related to the low-income population. I'll let you read the quote about the Mystic Valley Regional Charter School, but the rebuttal to that is that in FY14, the poverty rate of students at Mystic Valley Charter School, which is comprised of cities such as Malden, Peabody, Everett, and Medford, those are cities and towns that are located just outside of Boston, is half that of Medford and Peabody, 29% of Malden's, and 21% of Everett's. And from 2010 to 2014, an average of 20% of Mystic Valley students were living in poverty. During the same period, Peabody and Medford had an average poverty rate of 32.5%. Malden was at 60% and Everett was at 75%. So the difference is quite vast between some of those cities and Mystic Valley students. MCAS and English language learners, only about 5% of Massachusetts students are ELL. The vast majority of them attend urban public schools or urban charters. Non-urban charters have seen little growth in their enrollment of ELLs. In fact, they enroll less than a quarter of ELL students compared to TPSs. Almost 40% of the ELL enrollment in the Boston charter schools is attributable to one school out of the 19 within the city. And over the 5 years since the Achievement Gap Act passed, 2 ELL students have taken the MCAS exams at Sturgis Charter and none at Boston Collegiate Charter School, which was interesting to me. The Achievement Gap was created in 2010, as most of you, I'm sure, know, to improve student performance across the Commonwealth. And just to back up very quickly, so we're talking here about the Mystic Valley Regional Charter School, but similar proclamations and reported rebuttals were stated regarding the Sturgis Charter School, which is comprised of towns in the Cape, Dennis, Yarmouth, Sandwich, and Barnstable, and the Boston Collegiate Charter School as well. So SPED population within charter schools. So across the charter sector, schools serve fewer special education students than the TPSs, both in number of students and as a proportion of their enrollment. The overall proportion of charter school students who are SPED is 12% compared to 16% in TPSs. And most SPED students in charter schools have either a specific learning disability or a communications impairment, and while they may be mild to severe disabilities, depending upon the student, given that charters provide services through full inclusion, an assumption can be made that most of the students have mild disabilities, whereas TPSs educate students in all disability categories. It's also important to note here that charter schools have no students in substantially separate programs. Full inclusion means that special education students are in general education classrooms 100% or most of the time, whereas substantially separate means that the students are substantially separate from general education most of the time. And urban charter schools have lower percentages of SPED students from their TPS counterparts. I just thought that these were interesting graphics. This first one is the students with disabilities in urban districts and urban charters. The charters are in blue and the districts is in purple, and while some of the differences are minuscule, it's still interesting to see and understandable given the amount of TPSs versus charter schools. So I know this graphic's hard to read, I apologize, but I think it speaks to the differences in SPED in urban TPSs, which is the green, and the urban charters, which is the blue. The wording on the right is broken down by disability: learning disabled, communication impairment, emotional disturbance, developmentally delayed, autism, and intellectual disability. And urban charters are not educating the same categories of SPED students as the counterpart districts, and over 90% of the population is educated by the TPSs. So, given the literature I've just reviewed, in order to proceed with determining what type of students are filling charter school seats and how it impacts standardized testing, I intend to focus my research, aside from the data that I've already collected, that I'll continue to collect by reading previously written reports. I'll also do sampling, which by way of interviews of charter school parents, students, teachers, and administrators to better understand the charter school culture and why a charter was chosen. I propose to do a pool of samplers, ideally from different parts of the state, Western Mass, down the Cape, that sort of thing. But each interview would certainly have the same individuals being interviewed, meaning an administrator, a student, and a parent. I also would propose to do observations, and I know I'm already suggesting to visit the charter areas, but I would like to be observing more the charter schools across the state, same mannerism as before during the school day this time, in order to observe what kind of students are attending, how those classes are taught, and to get a general idea of the climate. I think it would be ideal to visit some of the schools during standardized testing preparation and also leading up to the test day, perhaps even during the test day, if possible, because I think I have a great understanding of how general education in traditional public schools works when it comes to standardized testing, having lived through it, and I also have a family of public school educators that have filled me in a little bit, but understanding charter schools would be ideal here. So the policy implications, who cares? While charter schools are reportedly doing great things for students, it's evident, particularly given all the media attention as of late, that we need to better understand who's being served at these schools and whether or not the reported enrollment is benefiting all those underserved elsewhere. Given the positive standardized test scores reported by charter schools, some parents may elect to apply to one of the schools for their child but be disappointed in the results because they might not fit the mold of the charter school population. Again, charter schools are a great public school choice option, but my proposal for this research clearly shows that there may be some limitations and variances among the SPED, low-income, and ELL populations, which are skewing the results of testing and thus implying an apples-to-apples comparison to TPSs when in reality it's not that clear. And given the results that have been expressed throughout my presentation regarding charter schools, it would be a disservice to those who are underserved in other facets and those who are currently included in standardized testing to not further examine the enrollment trends and standardized testing data within the charter schools in order to really decipher whether a change in the policy is needed or not. Thanks very much for listening. I look forward to hearing your feedback.